Hey guys, my name is John Evans. I coach many of the highest jumpers in the world, and in this video, we're gonna teach you what squats you should do, whether front, back, overhead, or belt, and how to integrate them into your training plan. So the first question is, what squat should you do? Well, like I said, there are four really common ones, and that's gonna be the back squat, the front squat, the overhead squat, and the one that I like to do is the belt squat. Let's assume that all of these are gonna be full range of motion, and we'll cover squat depth in another video. So first one we're gonna cover is the front squat. So a front squat is where the bar is actually in the front of your body, so it's called a front squat because it's on a front rack. The bar is actually gonna sit on your neck, above your clavicle, and on the AC joint. To do this correctly, you probably need pretty good shoulder mobility, and you wanna keep your hands open. But to maintain a really good rack position, you also need a lot of external rotation in your shoulders. So if you don't have that, then this lift is gonna be hard for you to do. So if you're someone who is incredibly hip dominant, the front squat is gonna be a lift that I would recommend for you. Now the reason for this is that if you tip over, this will load your hip and your hamstring more, similar to what a power lifter would do. Because the bar is in the front rack, if you tip over, you will lose position and the bar will fall off your shoulders. So it forces you to stay very upright, which will end up causing you to load the knee and quadricep more than your hip. This is amazing for athletes who generally don't know how to squat well or don't know how to do a high bar Olympic back squat, which we'll cover next. And it's a really good option for guys who have a lot of back pain and need to stay very, very vertical to be able to get high loads in their quadriceps and legs. Another reason that I really like it is that when back squatting gets a little bit too monotonous, front squat's a really good way to add variety and still get a really, really strong stimulus for your nervous system and the muscles. Also, if you guys are interested in getting coaching, then go to THPStrength.com and sign up. We write all of the squats that you need to do, what sets, what reps, etc. It's 90% off your first month if you go and sign up on the website right now. Now, the next squat that we're gonna cover is the back squat. Now, what makes it a back squat is obviously that the bar is across your back. You ideally want it below that C6 bone on your neck. So the big bone, if you reach behind your head, you want the bar below that point on your traps with your elbows either up or down, depends on who you talk to. Ollie lifters like to put their elbows down and push up. I personally like to have a good rack position and keep my elbows back. Now, the reason this lift is such a staple is because it balances the load between the hip and the knee. I would still say that the back squat is primarily knee dominant, but it's gonna do a really good job of loading all of the important structures that you need to jump higher as a 1 foot or 2 foot jumper. Now, specifically, like I said earlier, I like a high bar Olympic style back squat. So if you've ever seen Olympic weightlifters lift before and do deep squats, that's how I like my athletes, my jumping athletes, to squat. This ensures that you're not pushing the butt back and loading the hip and hamstring, which is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a balanced load between the knee and the hip. Now remember, the position that you're in and where the bar is going to dictate how much you load each individual muscle. I will say that this does predominantly drive up 2 foot vertical jumps, but it is also incredibly important to do, especially in partial ranges of motion for 1 foot jumpers. It's very common for elite high jumpers to use this, and I myself have had great success. When I was in high school, I was back squatting a lot, and I went from being able to do one-handers to essentially being able to do two hands off of just one step when I was about 16 or 17 and very plateaued. Another major benefit is this is gonna be great for increasing the muscular size of your relevant tissue. So your quadriceps, as I said previously, your glutes, the prime mover in 1 foot and 2 foot jumping, and it's also gonna do a good job of addressing your high hamstring, which is involved in extending the hip. As a final note, if you're weak, you definitely need to get this lift up, but also if you're strong, you pretty much can't be too strong in a high bar Olympic style squat. Isaiah's up to about 405, and if I could have him at 500, I would. If I could have him at 600, I would, assuming that he stays healthy. Now, the next type of squat I don't usually put in my programs, and that's gonna be an overhead squat. This lift requires you to have pretty good shoulder mobility, and you have to have good balance. It's a great assessment for mobility for guys with their shoulders and also their hips. If you can't do a full overhead squat, then odds are you probably have some sort of deficient mobility, and this is a good movement screen to see where those deficiencies occur. If you notice you're falling forward a lot, the issue's probably in your ankles. If you notice that guys are pushing the bar forward as they squat down, then it's probably gonna be something related to their chest or their shoulder or something along those lines. As far as athletic performance, I really don't put this in the program loaded. It's more so on general days if I wanna use it as a complex to increase volume, or if I wanna start to prime guys for power snatch or split snatch later on in their athletic development. It is also really good for developing coordination, and that's why I do sometimes use it. And lastly, the belt squat. The belt squat is an awesome lift for guys who have a lot of mobility issues, maybe previous injuries that they're working around, but still wanna do a very highly loaded squat. Now, if you're one of these athletes, I would strongly encourage you to experiment with using the belt squat with the same prescriptions that you would use on a front squat or a back squat. Odds are you can probably do more volume and intensity because your back's not gonna be a limiter, so it's a really, really good tool for athletes who are trying to balance variables but still train really, really hard. For example, when Isaiah has a back flare up or maybe his PFP is bothering him, I'll throw him on the belt squat and we can still get crazy loads. Same thing applies to Josh. if his upper back's a little bit sore and we don't want to load him axially in a front squat or back squat, we can still get really high loading and work around those issues by using the belt squat. Additionally, if you have the one that I have, which is a rhino belt squat, you can use your hands to balance. It doesn't require as much mobility in the lumbopelvic region, so your low back and your hips, and you can use your hands to balance and still get forward range of motion. The only downside to this is that you will develop instability in your intra-abdominal muscles. These muscles are really important for bracing, and this is also an underlying determinant of whether or not you're going to be able to handle a lot of force into the ground off of 1 foot and 2 foot. Another benefit is you can add a ton of volume with these. So if you're someone that finds they have a hard time chewing up squat volume, I'd encourage you to give the belt squat a try. I would encourage you to use a pulley system and not a lever system. The pulley system is about 1-to-1 compared to a back squat or a front squat, whereas a lever system, you're going to use way more weight to be able to get the same intramuscular loading. Now, when should you do each of these different squats? Well, as I said, I really like the belt squat basically year round because there's really no downside other than potentially weakening some of those intra-abdominal muscles, or maybe you can make the argument that it's not as functional because there's less balance involved, but you could just cross your hands in front of you to alleviate that problem. Now, the barbell squat, I like to use once or twice a week if the athlete can handle it. Very rarely can they do it 3 times a week. And front squat, I usually use once a week. It's very rare that I'm gonna front squat more than once a week because I'm also filling in back squat or belt squat if the athlete needs it. Overhead squat, I'm really not gonna program unless it's gonna be on those general days. So your high intensity days, your heavy lifts, your powerful movements, you're gonna wanna do either a back squat or a front squat, but at least once a week you should be back squatting. Now, the downside with the front squat is it does require a little bit more mobility and it doesn't have quite the loading that a back squat does. You will get more loading in the quadricep, but again, we're looking for max neural output, and the back squat is really gonna allow you to max out your brain and your spinal cord and all of the motor units being recruited during that lift, which is really important for improving your vertical jump. Now, in terms of an annual plan, I like to use different ranges of motion of each of these lifts, but specifically the back squat and belt squat closer to competition. So for example, if Isaiah is getting into the winter when he has a lot of events, or late summer, then he probably needs to be doing a lot of back squatting, either A, to drive up the specific faculties that'll help him jump higher, or B, we use it to also just maintain his health. So if you're an athlete, you're close to season, I'd encourage you to be back squatting or belt squatting more than doing front squat or overhead squat. An example week would be doing 5 sets of 5 on Monday with a back squat, Wednesday coming in and front squatting, maybe you do something like 4x10, and then on Friday, if you can handle it, hitting a little bit more of intensity, potentially 6x3 would be a good option. Now, if you couldn't do the back squat one of those days, you would just sub in the belt squat. Ultimately, anytime you're trying to push intent, you're gonna wanna use the back squat or the belt squat. If you're proficient in a back squat and you can stand up really quickly, you're gonna wanna use that exercise to, again, drive up the neural components, increase the motor recruitment, and ultimately jump higher at the end of the day. So earlier in the year, you can get away with doing more front squat. If you want to front squat twice a week, maybe on a Monday or Wednesday, you can do that. If you want to throw in some overhead squats, go for it. But as you get later and later into the season, or you're in pre-competitive stages or specific prep stages, which is about 3 to 4 months into a macro cycle, you're going to want to be doing more back squat, and you're especially going to want to be doing it relatively heavy. Now, pre-competitive stage, I do like to push people's squat up quite a bit. And the reason for this is because it is the most specific training that they're going to be doing outside of competing. When you're in season, you don't necessarily want to be squatting too heavy too frequently, or you're going to get hurt. You're not going to be able to display your output that you've developed all year. And so as a result, you're not going to want to be squatting too heavy at that time of year. Again, this would be about 4 to 5 months in if you're planning on peaking in month 6 or 7. In terms of what other lifts you would want to do around this, I probably wouldn't load the quadricep anymore outside of a squat, whether it's a front squat, back squat, belt squat, overhead squat. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to add in leg extensions. I'm not going to add in split squats. I'm going to keep most of the loading on any given day reserved for my squat volume.